The Atlanta Falcons aren't just hiring a new head coach, they're completely blowing up the organization and rebuilding from scratch in the most dramatic overhaul we've seen in years. Kevin Stefanski officially signed a 5-year deal less than 24 hours ago, and he's already assembling a completely new coaching staff that's raiding the Cleveland Browns, keeping Atlanta's best defensive minds, and bringing in one of the most respected offensive line coaches in NFL history. Jeff Ulbrich is staying as defensive coordinator. Tommy Rees is coming from Cleveland as OC, and Bill Callahan, the legendary offensive line coach who helped Stefanski make the playoffs twice in Cleveland, is leaving Tennessee to join Atlanta. And the bombshell nobody saw coming, longtime Falcons offensive line coach Dwayne Ledford, who fans loved and wanted to keep, is being shown the door to make room for Stefanski's guys. This isn't tinkering around the edges. This is a complete franchise reset where Matt Ryan and Arthur Blank are betting everything that Stefanski can take a talented roster stuck in an 8-year playoff drought and turn them into instant contenders. Smash that subscribe button right now because we're about to break down every coaching staff move, expose why Ledford got fired despite being beloved, and reveal how this massive overhaul could either save the Falcons or blow up in spectacular fashion. Let's start with the timeline because the speed of this entire operation is absolutely insane. Kevin Stefanski was fired by Cleveland on January 5th. Exactly 13 days later, on January 18th, he interviewed at Arthur Blank's mansion, ate steaks that the billionaire owner personally cooked, got offered the job at the dinner table, and signed a 5-year contract that same night. The Falcons announced it during a live playoff game because they couldn't wait another hour to tell the world. And by Sunday morning, less than 12 hours after signing the deal, Stefanski was already making massive coaching staff decisions that are reshaping the entire organization. According to NFL insider Ian Rapoport's report on NFL Game Day morning, Stefanski's staff is already coming together at lightning speed. Jeff Ulbrich is staying on as defensive coordinator, which is huge for Atlanta's defensive continuity. Tommy Rees, who was Stefanski's offensive coordinator in Cleveland this past season, is likely coming to Atlanta as the OC. And Bill Callahan, the 65-year-old offensive line guru who worked with Stefanski in Cleveland from 2020 to 2023 before leaving to coach his son Brian with the Tennessee Titans, is reportedly joining the Falcons as their offensive line coach. That's 3 massive moves announced before Stefanski's been on the job for even 24 hours. But here's where it gets controversial and where Falcons fans are absolutely split. The Callahan hire means Dwayne Ledford, Atlanta's offensive line coach since 2021 and run game coordinator since 2024, is being let go. Ledford admitted just a few weeks ago after the season ended. Bill Callahan isn't just any offensive line coach. He's one of the most respected position coaches in NFL history. He was the head coach of the Oakland Raiders from 2002 to 2003 and won an AFC championship in 2002. He's coached Pro Bowl offensive lines, developed all-pro players, and built running games that dominated opponents. When he was with Cleveland under Stefanski from 2020 to 2023, the Browns' offensive line was solid and the running game was elite. Cleveland finished in the top 6 in average rushing yards per game 3 times during that span, with Nick Chubb becoming one of the best running backs in football behind Callahan's blocking schemes. So Stefanski knows exactly what Callahan brings, and he trusts him to rebuild Atlanta's offensive line that needs help. The Falcons have 4-time All-Pro right guard Chris Lindstrom, one of the best guards in football, and right tackle Caleb McGarry is expected to return after suffering a season-ending injury just before the 2025 season kicked off. But they need upgrades at left tackle, center, and potentially left guard. Callahan's job will be retooling that line, implementing Stefanski's run-heavy scheme, and creating lanes for Bijan Robinson, the all-pro running back who's the foundation of Atlanta's offense. But Falcons fans who loved Ledford are furious that he's being pushed out. Ledford did solid work in Atlanta, developing young linemen and coordinating a run game that helped Bijan Robinson earn first-team All-Pro honors as a running back and second-team All-Pro as an all-purpose player in 2025. Losing Ledford stings, but this is what happens when a new head coach comes in with established relationships and a vision for how he wants to build his staff. Stefanski isn't interested in keeping Ledford just because he's familiar to Atlanta fans. He wants Callahan because he knows Callahan's system, trusts his teaching, and believes he can maximize the talent on the roster. The Tommy Rees hire as offensive coordinator is equally significant and equally controversial. Rees is only 33 years old, incredibly young for an offensive coordinator, but he's got an impressive resume considering his age. He played quarterback in Notre Dame, then immediately got into coaching at his alma mater. He spent time as Notre Dame's offensive coordinator, then moved to Alabama to work under Nick Saban, then joined Stefanski's staff in Cleveland as passing game coordinator and tight ends coach in 2024, before getting promoted to offensive coordinator in 2025. In his first season running Stefanski's offense as the official OC, the Browns finished 4th in total yards and 14th in total points, despite cycling through 3 different starting quarterbacks, Dylan Gabriel, Kenny Pickett, and Shedeur Sanders. That's actually impressive when you consider the quarterback chaos Cleveland dealt with all season. Rees navigated through that disaster and still gave the Browns one of their best statistical offensive seasons in the last decade. So Stefanski clearly trusts him, believes in his ability to design plays and manage game plans, and wants to bring him to Atlanta to work with significantly better offensive talent. But here's the big question. Will Rees actually be calling plays, or will Stefanski take over play-calling duties himself? Multiple reports suggest Stefanski will likely call plays initially in Atlanta because he's working with way more offensive talent than he ever had in Cleveland, and he probably wants to prove he can still design and execute an elite offense when surrounded by playmakers like Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and hopefully a healthy Michael Penix Jr. Stefanski has given up play-calling duties multiple times during his career, delegating to coordinators, but this feels like a situation where he'll want control, at least in year 1. If that's the case, then Rees becomes more of a right-hand man who helps with game planning, scheme installation, quarterback development, and in-game adjustments, rather than the primary play caller. That's still a valuable role, especially if Stefanski trusts Rees enough to eventually hand over play-calling responsibilities in future seasons. But some Falcons fans are skeptical about hiring a 33-year-old coordinator from a Browns offense that ranked 31st in scoring last year and only improved to 14th under Rees's leadership in 2025. The Jeff Ulbrich decision to stay as defensive coordinator is the easiest and smartest move Stefanski made. Ulbrich just wrapped up his first season as Atlanta's defensive coordinator, and the results were impressive. The Falcons ranked 2nd in the entire NFL with 57 sacks in 2025, ending a decade-plus drought of struggling to generate consistent pressure on quarterbacks. That pass rush surge was led by rookie James Pierce Jr., who had 10.5 sacks, Brandon Dorlus with 8.5 sacks in his second season, and Jalon Walker with 5.5 sacks as a rookie. The young defensive core is trending upward, and Ulbrich is the architect. Jeff Ulbrich specifically said before hiring Stefanski that he would recommend Ulbrich to the new head coach and hoped he'd be retained. The Falcons even denied at least one team permission to interview Ulbrich for a defensive coordinator position elsewhere, signaling how badly they wanted to keep him. And it makes perfect sense, because Stefanski is an offensive-minded head coach who needs a strong defensive coordinator to run that side of the ball. If Ulbrich stays on and continues building the defense while Stefanski focuses on the offense, Atlanta suddenly has balance and expertise on both sides of the ball for the first time in years. Ulbrich isn't new to Atlanta either. He spent 6 years as a defensive assistant with the Falcons from 2014 to 2020, working as linebackers coach and eventually being promoted to assistant head coach and interim defensive coordinator in his final season. Then he left for the New York Jets, where he spent 4 years as defensive coordinator and ended his tenure as interim head coach. He came back to Atlanta in 2025 and immediately made an impact, turning a defense that was horrible in 2024 into a top 10 pass rushing unit in 2025. So the coaching staff structure is taking shape rapidly. Kevin Stefanski as head coach and likely offensive play caller, Tommy Rees as offensive coordinator, handling game planning and quarterback development, Bill Callahan coaching the offensive line and implementing run-blocking schemes, Jeff Ulbrich as defensive coordinator continuing to build an elite pass rush, And there will be more hires coming in the next few weeks as Stefanski fills out the rest of his staff with position coaches, special teams coordinator, and assistant coordinators. But the roster overhaul is just as significant as the coaching staff changes, and that's where this story gets even more dramatic. The Falcons have already made massive decisions at quarterback that will define Stefanski's tenure. Kirk Cousins, who signed a 4-year, $180 million contract in March 2024, just had his deal restructured a few weeks ago. They slashed his 2026 base salary from $35 million to just $2.1 million and moved that money to 2027, creating a $67.9 million guarantee that vests on March 13th. What that means is simple. If the Falcons don't cut or trade Cousins before March 13th, they'll owe him nearly $68 million for 2027, which would be organizational malpractice. So Cousins is almost certainly getting released, probably designated as a post-June 1st cut to split the dead cap money between 2026 and 2027. That saves the Falcons significant cap space and allows them to move forward with Michael Penix Jr. as the franchise quarterback. Penix is recovering from a torn ACL he suffered in November during a Week 11 overtime loss to Carolina. He had surgery performed by Dr. Neil Elatrache, the same surgeon who's fixed ACLs for Tom Brady, Kobe Bryant, and countless other elite athletes. The recovery timeline is 9 months minimum, which means if everything goes perfectly, Penix might be ready by August 2026 for training camp. But this is Penix's third major knee surgery. He tore his right ACL twice during college at Indiana before transferring to Washington. 3 ACL reconstructions by age 25 is terrifying from a durability standpoint, and it's the massive question mark hanging over Stefanski's entire tenure. Can Penix stay healthy? Can his knee hold up over a full 17-game NFL season? And even if he is healthy, can Stefanski develop him into a franchise quarterback? Matt Ryan, Atlanta's new president of football and the guy who led the coaching search and landed Stefanski, released a statement putting his faith in Penix. Ryan emphasized that the organization believes in Penix's potential and that Stefanski's offensive system will help maximize his talents. That's the dream scenario. Stefanski builds a run-heavy offense around Bijan Robinson that sets up play-action passes for Penix, creating easy reads and protecting him from having to make too many dangerous throws. If it works, the Falcons could have an elite offense led by an all-pro running back and a developing young quarterback. But if Penix isn't ready for Week 1, or if he struggles when he returns, or if the knee becomes a recurring problem, Stefanski will be right back in the nightmare he just left in Cleveland, cycling through quarterbacks, searching for answers at the most important position, and trying to win games without a reliable starter. The Falcons don't have a first-round pick in the 2026 draft because they traded it to move up and select James Pierce Jr. in 2025, so they can't draft a quarterback early. Their only options would be signing a veteran free agent like Sam Darnold or Mac Jones or trying to trade for someone. The roster does have elite talent scattered throughout both sides of the ball, which is why this job was so attractive to Stefanski despite the quarterback uncertainty. Bijan Robinson is arguably the best all-around running back in the NFL, a first-team All-Pro who can run, catch, and dominate in every phase of the game. Drake London is a legitimate number 1 wide receiver who can win contested catches and make plays downfield. Kyle Pitts, if the Falcons can re-sign him, finally re-established himself as an elite tight end in 2025 after years of underperforming. That's a core of offensive playmakers that Stefanski never had in Cleveland. Defensively, the talent is young and improving fast. A.J. Terrell is a lockdown corner when healthy. Jesse Bates III is an all-pro safety who made second-team all-pro in 2025. Xavier Watts is another safety who showed flashes. James Pierce Jr. is a pass-rushing monster as a rookie. Jalon Walker and Brandon Dorless give Atlanta multiple young edge rushers who can get after the quarterback. If Ulbrich keeps developing these guys, and Stefanski's offense gives them leads to protect, this defense could become elite. But there are massive holes that the next few weeks will determine everything. Stefanski needs to finish assembling his coaching staff, filling out the remaining position coach roles and special teams coordinator. He needs to meet with the current roster, establish relationships with leaders like Bijan Robinson, Chris Lindstrom, Jesse Bates, and A.J. Terrell, and convince them this regime will be different. He needs to collaborate with Matt Ryan on the GM search. Atlanta still needs to hire a general manager who'll report to Ryan and work with Stefanski on roster decisions. And once that GM is in place, they need to attack free agency in March and the draft in April with a clear plan for filling the roster holes. The overhaul is massive, the pressure is enormous, and the timeline is tight. Stefanski went from fired to hired in 13 days, and now he's completely rebuilding the Falcons organization from the coaching staff down to the roster in a matter of weeks. Tommy Rees, Bill Callahan, and Jeff Ulbrich are the foundation of his staff. Michael Penix Jr. is the franchise quarterback they're betting on. Bijan Robinson is the offensive centerpiece, and the NFC South is wide open, with Tampa Bay, Carolina, and New Orleans all in various states of rebuilding. Meaning if Stefanski can get this right, a division title and playoff berth are absolutely within reach. But if he gets it wrong, if Penix can't stay healthy, if the offensive line doesn't improve, if the defense regresses, if they go 8-9 again, then this entire overhaul will be remembered as another failed experiment in a franchise defined by them. Kevin Stefanski has his second chance to prove he's an elite head coach. The Falcons have bet their future on him fixing their 8-year playoff drought, and the coaching staff overhaul happening right now will determine if that bet pays off or becomes another disaster.